I walked into the bathroom and found her phone. It was unlocked, and my husband had been texting her, calling her wife, sending my recipes, even photos of me asleep with jokes about my weight. She was my assistant. They were planning a Jamaica trip using my miles. He just shrugged and said, "You shouldn't have snooped." So I sent every file from his laptop to her husband. I didn't mean to look. I swear I didn't. I just went into the guest bathroom to grab some Advil from the cabinet, and her phone was sitting right there on the counter, screen lit up, wide open, messages rolling in. At first, I only saw his name. Daniel, my husband. My heart froze, then I saw the preview. "You looked perfect last night. Can't wait for Jamaica, my wife." It was like my stomach turned inside out. Wife. I tapped the screen with shaking hands, and the thread opened up like a trapdoor under my life. Photos of me sleeping, taken from our bed. Comments about my body, about how she never even notices when I'm gone. My recipes, the ones I'd spent years perfecting for my small catering business, sent to her like gifts. He even sent her the client list I'd spent months building. And her, she was my assistant, my friend. She was the one who helped me unload groceries, prep for events, talk about my marriage like she cared. The messages went back months. There were hotel receipts, flight confirmations, a shared folder on Google Drive named Jamaica 2025 Our Escape. He was paying with my travel miles. I remember staring at the mirror and not recognizing the woman looking back at me. I was shaking so hard I had to grip the counter just to breathe. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. Didn't even flinch. He just shrugged, looked me dead in the eye and said, "You shouldn't have snooped, Emily." That was all. Like I was the one who broke something. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at him until he walked away to finish a call. That night, while he slept in the guest room like nothing had happened, I opened his laptop. He'd left it unlocked. I went through every folder, every chat, every file he'd ever tried to hide from me. By 3 a.m., I had everything: screenshots, receipts, recordings, even voice notes between him and her laughing about me. And then I found his secret messages to her husband. That's when it clicked. Her husband didn't know a thing. He was a quiet guy, a mechanic, nice to me every time we'd met. So I sent everything. Every photo, every message, every file. Straight to his inbox. No subject line, no explanation, just the truth. And then, before everything exploded, life looked ordinary. I thought that was a good thing. Daniel and I had been married 9 years. We weren't newlyweds anymore, but we'd built a solid life in Raleigh, North Carolina. We owned a small house in a quiet neighborhood with a magnolia tree out front and a porch swing he'd installed himself one summer. I ran a small but growing catering business, mostly weddings and corporate events. Daniel worked in it for a logistics company, the kind of job where he could work from home half the week. It was stable, predictable. I used to think that meant safe. When my business started picking up, I hired an assistant, Sarah. She was 28, pretty in that effortless, casual way, and sharp as hell. She said she'd done restaurant management before, and honestly, she seemed perfect. She was organized, funny, and got me. She even brought coffee for me the first morning we worked together, my exact order. For months, she became my right hand. She met my clients, helped me prep meals, handled invoices, even stayed late with me when I was buried in orders. I remember thinking, God, I don't know how I ever managed without her. Daniel liked her too. At first, it didn't bother me. She was polite to him, helped him figure out his new phone once, even joked that we were couple goals. Sometimes, when she was around, he'd laugh in this easy, relaxed way he hadn't in years. I told myself that was good, that maybe we all needed that energy around. But then small things started feeling off. Like how Sarah suddenly started wearing perfume that smelled eerily like the one I used. Or how Daniel would mention something random, like a song or a meme, and she'd know exactly what he was talking about before I did. Then there was the catering event in Charlotte. I couldn't go because I came down with the flu. Sarah insisted she'd handle it. I trusted her. Later that weekend, Daniel said he was going to help a friend move and didn't come back until Sunday night. I didn't think to connect the dots then. I should have. By that point, Daniel and I weren't perfect. We'd been arguing more, little things about money, about how much I worked, about how tired he always was. But he still kissed me goodnight. He still said, "I love you." I remember one night, about a month before the bathroom discovery, Sarah and I were cleaning up after a catering job. She looked at me and said, almost wistfully, "You're lucky, Emily. You have a man who actually supports what you do." I smiled, said something dumb like, "Yeah, he's a good one," and she smiled back. But there was something in her eyes that didn't match her words. Now I know exactly what it was. And the worst part, I would have helped her with anything. If she had problems with her husband, if she needed money, a place to stay, I would have given it. That's the kind of person I was. The kind of person they both counted on me being. After that night in the bathroom, everything I thought was steady began to crack, even in memory. It's strange how betrayal rewrites the past. You start replaying moments you brushed off, hearing things you missed. Like the way Daniel had started locking his phone. He'd always been careless about it before, leaving it on the counter, in the car, wherever. Then one day it was face down everywhere, notifications off. "Work stuff," he said. Or how Sarah began showing up in new clothes, expensive ones. Designer handbags, manicured nails, eyelash extensions. She told me she was finally treating herself. I believed her. I even complimented her once. It's pathetic now, how easily I let them both lie to my face. The weeks leading up to the discovery were chaos. I had 3 weddings to cater in 2 weekends, and Sarah handled a lot of the deliveries. She insisted I rest more, said I looked burnt out. Daniel agreed. They were always in sync about things like that. It was subtle, but now I know they were syncing their stories. Then the little mistakes started. Orders misplaced. Ingredients missing from the supply list. Clients saying Sarah had to leave early or took a phone call that went long. At the time, I blamed her disorganization. I didn't realize those absences were stolen hours with my husband. The last straw before I found the phone came during an event for a big corporate client. Sarah said she'd handle setup while I stayed behind to prep the next batch of appetizers. Daniel called halfway through the night, said he was stuck late working on a server issue. Both of them gone, both with perfect excuses. When Sarah came in the next morning, she was glowing. I thought she'd just slept well. She handed me a coffee, again, my exact order, and said, "You're killing it lately, Em." I remember smiling, exhausted and stupid, not realizing that same morning she had a text thread going with my husband titled "My Real Wife." But after the bathroom, after I sent those files to her husband, I started noticing everything she'd taken. Not just my recipes or my clients, my confidence. She'd copied my speech patterns, my brand voice on social media, even my handwriting in the thank you cards to clients. It wasn't admiration. It was replacement. I didn't hear from her husband for 2 days after I sent the files. I kept checking my email, wondering if he'd seen it, if he'd confront her, if I'd just blown up 4 lives at once. Meanwhile, Daniel was acting normal. Too normal, making coffee, doing laundry, even asking if I wanted to talk. When I didn't answer, he said, "You're really going to punish me for something you weren't even supposed to see." That's when something in me went quiet. Cold. I realized I'd been dealing with a man who didn't see what he did as wrong. To him, it was about control. And I was about to take that back. But before I could even plan how, her husband finally called. His voice was low, shaking. He just said, "Emily, we need to meet. You don't know everything." We met at a diner off Capitol Boulevard, one of those old places that still smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee. It was raining hard that morning, the kind of Carolina rain that makes everything gray and slick. Her husband, Mark, looked wrecked. He had that hollow, sleepless look of someone who's been living off caffeine and rage for days. When I sat down across from him, he didn't even say hello, just slid his phone across the table. "Read this," he said. It was a message thread between Sarah and Daniel, sure, but not the one I'd already seen. This was older, deeper. A whole other side of things. In this thread, they weren't just lovers. They were plotting. It started small, jokes about me working too much, comments about my easy passwords. Then it got darker. They were talking about transferring my business accounts, slowly, quietly, into a new LLC. One that used my company's name with just a slight variation. Same logo, same branding. They even filed paperwork for it. I recognized my own EIN number in one screenshot. They weren't just cheating. They were trying to take everything I built. Mark said he found it after I'd sent him the files. He'd confronted Sarah the night before, and she'd completely lost it, screaming, denying, crying, then finally admitting that yes, she and Daniel had been working on something together. That something was my business. She told Mark that Daniel was going to help her run it once she left me, that they were ready to move on with their lives, and that they'd already started reaching out to my clients, pretending the business was rebranding under a new partnership. Mark said he'd caught her with a flash drive, one she'd tried to hide in the lining of her purse. He smashed it open and found copies of all my client files, invoices, tax forms, everything. Then he said the words that made my stomach flip. They already opened a bank account in both their names. Using your business address. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft, premeditated and methodical. And they'd done it together, smiling in my kitchen, eating my food, laughing at my jokes. Mark looked at me and said, "I'm not letting her get away with this, but I thought you should know before you decide what to do." That night, when I got home, Daniel was sitting in the living room like nothing had happened, watching TV. Eating takeout, he didn't even look up when I walked in. "Rough day?" he asked. I stared at him. I thought about all the years I'd loved him, all the times I'd defended him when people said he was cold. I thought about Sarah smiling as she took notes in my office, pretending to be loyal. Then I smiled back and said, "Not as rough as it's about to be." Because if they wanted to steal my business and my life, they'd picked the wrong woman to underestimate. And I was just getting started. I didn't sleep that night. Not 1 second. I sat on the couch with a legal pad, laptop open, writing everything down, every lie, every date, every digital breadcrumb they'd left behind. If they wanted war, I wasn't going to scream or throw things. I was going to document. First thing I did was make a backup of all my business data on an external hard drive. Client contacts, signed contracts, tax forms, even my recipes. Then I logged into my QuickBooks and bank accounts, and sure enough, there it was, multiple unauthorized transfers. Small amounts, $200 here, $500 there, spread over weeks. They'd been funneling it into their joint account under the new business. They were stupid enough to use my vendor account number on a few of them. That was my proof. I called my accountant the next morning, told him to freeze everything. I said there might be fraud. He didn't ask questions, just locked it all down. Then I called a lawyer, a sharp one. A woman named Karen Ashford, who'd helped one of my clients through a nasty partnership breakup. When I told her what was going on, she said, "Gather your evidence and don't say a word to them. Let's build this right." I sent her everything, every screenshot, email, transfer, and message thread. She said, "You've got them, Emily, but let's make it sting." Meanwhile, I played dumb. I made breakfast for Daniel, smiled. Asked if he'd heard from Sarah lately. He looked uncomfortable just for a second and said, "We're done talking. I told her this went too far." Lies, but I nodded like I believed him. While he worked in his office, I used the access I still had to his shared cloud drive. He'd been stupid enough to link his personal and work folders. That's where I found his business proposal draft, complete with my company name and logo on the cover page. The plan was to announce the new launch within 2 weeks. He'd even written a fake goodbye post for me, claiming I was stepping away for personal reasons. They had no idea I was 2 steps ahead. That weekend, I invited Sarah to meet at a cafe, pretending I wanted to clear the air. She hesitated but agreed. She showed up looking nervous, sunglasses on even though it was cloudy. I told her I forgave her. Told her I was ready to move on. She softened right away. Said she was so sorry, that Daniel was the one who pushed things too far. I nodded, smiled, and recorded every word on my phone. Then I dropped my first little truth bomb. I mentioned casually that I'd hired a new accountant to audit the business, and they'd found strange transfers. Her whole face changed. She stammered something about bookkeeping errors. I just said, "Yeah, maybe, we'll find out soon." Then I left her sitting there, pale and shaking. By Monday morning, my lawyer had filed preliminary fraud claims. My accountant had reversed the transfers. The bank froze their joint account. And just like that, their business was broke. Daniel stormed into the kitchen that night demanding to know what I'd done. I just looked him in the eye and said, "You shouldn't have used my recipes." He slammed the door so hard the glass shook, but that wasn't the end. Because a week later, Sarah disappeared from work entirely, and what came next changed everything I thought I knew about both of them. Sarah didn't show up Monday morning. No text, no call, no response to emails. At first, I thought she was just hiding from the fallout, but by noon, her husband Mark called me again. His voice was tight. "She's gone, Emily. Packed her stuff and left while I was at work. No note, no explanation. Just her phone on the counter and her wedding ring in the sink." I felt my stomach twist. "You think she's with Daniel?" he sighed. "I checked. She's not at his place. I even drove by. His car wasn't there either." That made my heart stop. I hadn't seen Daniel since the night he stormed out. He'd texted once saying he was staying with a friend and that I owed him an apology for ruining everything. Typical Daniel, acting like he was the victim. But now both of them were gone. Vanished. 2 days passed before I got my first clue. It came from my credit card company. They called about a flagged charge, 2 first-class tickets to Montego Bay, Jamaica, booked with my rewards miles. The trip was scheduled for that very week. They were still going on the trip, together, and they'd used the last of my miles before the bank froze the account. I almost laughed. The arrogance of it. The same trip they'd planned behind my back, still thinking I was powerless. But then I noticed something weird. The tickets weren't in their names. They were booked under fake ones, David and Sarah Lewis. I called Mark again. "She's with him. They used my points." He exhaled hard. "Let them go, Emily, maybe that's better." But something in me didn't believe that was the end. 3 nights later, at 2 a.m., I got a message from an unknown number. It was one photo. Daniel standing at a resort bar, arm around Sarah. Both of them smiling, except there was something off about it. The photo looked taken without their knowledge. The text underneath said, "You really should be careful who you steal from." No name, no number, just that. My blood ran cold. I didn't recognize the number, but I traced it. It was Jamaican. Someone had sent that from the island. I showed it to my lawyer the next day, and she frowned. "That's not random," she said. "Someone's warning you. Maybe one of their new business partners they tried to scam." Because when she'd looked deeper into their financial activity, she'd found something else. While Daniel and Sarah were plotting to steal my business, they were also scamming someone else. They'd taken a $30,000 investment from a supplier for their fake rebrand, promising future contracts that didn't exist. They didn't just betray me, they conned people. And now those people had apparently found them. 2 days after that message, Mark called again, this time panicked. "The police just came by," he said. "They found Sarah's car abandoned at the airport. No sign of her or Daniel." Nothing. I sat there on my couch, phone pressed to my ear, heart pounding. Because for the first time since everything started, I realized my revenge hadn't just ruined them. It had exposed them. And someone, somewhere, had decided to finish what I started. It took 2 weeks before I found out what really happened. Why Daniel had risked everything. Why Sarah had followed along. The truth didn't come from the police or Mark or even Daniel. It came from an email. It was from Sarah's older sister, someone I'd never met. The subject line just said, "You deserve to know what this was really about." The email was long, but one paragraph burned into my brain forever. "Sarah didn't just want your business. She wanted your life. Daniel wasn't her first. She's done this before twice. Both times she got involved with married men who had money, stability, something she thought she deserved. She always made sure to become indispensable to the wife first. It was her pattern. She would study women, copy them, steal from them, and then move in with their husbands when the marriage imploded. Daniel was just another pawn. But then came the part that turned my blood to ice. This time was different because Daniel wasn't innocent either. He came to her first. He was the one who approached her at a networking event before you ever hired her. He told her about your business, said he could make her rich if she played along. He picked her, Emily. He picked her to replace you. That was the cold, horrifying truth. It hadn't started with her. It started with him. Daniel had met Sarah months before I ever hired her. He'd known exactly who she was when he suggested I bring her on as help. He'd introduced us on purpose. He had orchestrated the whole thing. I felt sick. Every moment of friendship, every late night, every conversation. He'd been behind it, pulling the strings, watching me trust someone he'd planted in my life. Sarah might have been manipulative, but Daniel was methodical. He'd used her for access. My business passwords, client lists, finances, all of it. He didn't just cheat on me. He set up an entire operation to gut my career and walk away with everything that was mine. I thought back to all the times he'd criticized me for working too much, for being too trusting. He wasn't annoyed. He was testing how much control he had. It explained everything. The way he'd acted when I caught him, the lack of guilt. To him, I wasn't a wife. I was a resource, something to use up and discard once he'd taken the parts he needed. The final line of the email said, "Sarah might have thought she was playing him, but Daniel's the one who knew how to make people disappear." That's when I realized the disappearance wasn't random. Daniel and Sarah didn't just vanish because of the scam, they vanished because Daniel made sure they did. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was angry. Because if Daniel thought he could disappear with her and my money, he had no idea what kind of storm was still coming. By the time I reached the end of that email, something in me hardened. Fear was gone, so was grief. All that was left was this cold, sharp clarity. Daniel had spent years planning to replace me, to strip me of everything I'd built. And Sarah thought she was clever enough to ride his plan to a better life. They both underestimated me. The police eventually closed their missing persons case when footage surfaced of the two of them leaving the airport together, boarding their flight under those fake names. They never came back. As far as anyone knew, they were living abroad. No further investigation. Case closed. But I wasn't done. Through my lawyer, I filed a full civil suit in both of their names. Fraud, embezzlement, and intellectual property theft. Karen, my lawyer, was ruthless. She pushed to attach my claim to their social security numbers, so even if they resurfaced, the debt would follow them forever. We froze what little money was left in the U.S. accounts. Then I made my next move. I used the same skills they'd mocked me for: my attention to detail, my drive, and rebuilt my business from the ashes. But I renamed it Second Serve Catering, a private little nod to everything they tried to take. And then I made sure everyone in our industry knew what they'd done. Every client, every vendor, every supplier, they all got polite, factual emails documenting the fraud with attached evidence. No drama, just truth. By the end of that week, Sarah and Daniel were blacklisted from every hospitality and event network in the state. It wasn't loud revenge. It was steady, calculated, patient. Exactly the way Daniel had tried to play me. 6 months later, I got a single postcard from Montego Bay, no return address. Just 4 words scrawled in handwriting I'd know anywhere. "Still think you won?" I smiled when I saw it. Because yes, I had. By then, Second Serve had tripled my old revenue. I'd hired a small but loyal team, people I trusted like family. Mark had become a silent investor. He said he needed to see something good come out of all this. And me. I finally learned how to live without checking over my shoulder, without doubting my instincts. Daniel and Sarah could keep running, keep pretending they'd escaped the mess they made. But every time they tried to start over, every time they used their real names, opened a bank account, applied for credit, my claims would still be there, waiting. Their ghosts would follow them the way their betrayal once followed me. So no, I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I didn't chase them, I just outlived them. And that, in the end, was the real revenge, because they took my trust, but I took their future.